the voice that rose above the gathered mourners in Chico, California, that sweltering August afternoon in 1882, was the most beautiful thing Quinn Ollander had ever heard, even through the haze of his grief. He stood beside the simple pine coffin that held his older brother Marcus, hat pressed against his chest, dust from the trail still clinging to his boots because he had ridden 3 days straight to make it back in time. The woman singing was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with dark auburn hair pinned beneath a modest black bonnet, and her voice seemed to reach into his chest and squeeze his heart until he thought it might burst. She sang "Abide with Me" without any accompaniment, just her pure voice carrying across the small cemetery on the outskirts of town where the oak trees provided sparse shade from the relentless California sun. Quinn could not stop watching her even as tears tracked down his weathered cheeks. He was 26 years old and had seen more death than any man should in his years working cattle drives and breaking horses, but losing Marcus felt different. Marcus had been his anchor, the one who had raised him after their parents died when Quinn was barely 14. Now Marcus was gone, thrown from a spooked horse and breaking his neck in the fall, and Quinn felt unmoored in a way that terrified him. The woman's voice wavered on the final verse, and Quinn saw her own eyes were wet with tears, though she surely had not known his brother. When the song ended, the preacher said a few final words, and then people began to disperse, offering Quinn their condolences in hushed tones. He accepted them numbly, shaking hands and nodding, but his eyes kept searching for the woman who had sung. He found her standing beside a wagon near the cemetery gate, speaking quietly with an older woman who wore a similar black dress. Quinn approached slowly, suddenly uncertain. Up close, he could see that her eyes were a striking green, the color of new leaves in spring, and there was a sadness in them that seemed older than her years. "Excuse me, miss," Quinn said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I wanted to thank you for singing today. It was beautiful." She turned to him, and for a moment their eyes met and held. Quinn felt something shift in his chest, something he could not name. "You are Marcus's brother," she said softly. It was not a question. "I am so sorry for your loss. He was a good man." "You knew him?" Quinn asked, surprised. "He came into the general store where I work sometimes," she replied. "He always had a kind word, always asked how my day was going. The world is poorer without him in it." Quinn swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. "What is your name?" "Katherine Oliver," she said. "Most people call me Kate." "Quinn Ollander." He held out his hand and she took it. Her palm was warm and calloused in a way that told him she was no stranger to hard work. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, before Kate gently pulled away. "The preacher's wife asked if I would sing," Kate explained. "She knew I sang in the church choir. I hope it brought some comfort." "It did," Quinn said honestly. "It was the first moment since I got the telegram that I felt like I could breathe." Kate's expression softened with sympathy. "Grief is a terrible burden to bear, but you will find your way through it in time." The older woman with her cleared her throat pointedly, and Kate glanced back. "I should go. Mrs. Henderson needs to get back to town." Quinn nodded, but as Kate began to turn away, he found himself speaking before he could think better of it. "Miss Oliver, would you consider singing again sometime? Not at a funeral," he added quickly. "Just in general. Your voice is a gift." Kate paused, a faint smile touching her lips for the first time. "I sing in church most Sundays. You are welcome to attend if you wish." Then she was climbing into the wagon, and Quinn stepped back as Mrs. Henderson clicked to the horses and they rolled away down the dusty road toward town. Quinn stood watching until they disappeared from view, the echo of Kate's voice still ringing in his ears. The next few days passed in a blur of settling Marcus's affairs. Quinn learned that his brother had left him the small ranch where they had grown up, 20 acres of decent grazing land with a sturdy house and barn. Marcus had never married, had devoted his life to building something he could pass on to Quinn someday. The weight of that sacrifice sat heavy on Quinn's shoulders as he walked the property, trying to imagine a future here without his brother's steady presence. On Sunday, Quinn found himself getting cleaned up and riding into Chico for the church service. He told himself it was just to be respectful, to honor his brother's memory by attending the same church Marcus had gone to, but he knew the truth. He wanted to hear Kate sing again. The church was small and simple, whitewashed wood with a tall steeple and rows of plain wooden pews. Quinn slipped into a back row just as the service was beginning. The preacher, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, welcomed the congregation and then nodded toward the choir, which consisted of 6 people standing to the side of the pulpit. Kate stood in the center, and when they began to sing, her voice rose above the others like a meadowlark's song. Quinn closed his eyes and let the music wash over him. For those few minutes, the ache of grief in his chest eased, replaced by something lighter. When he opened his eyes, he found Kate looking directly at him, and she gave him the smallest of smiles before turning her attention back to her hymnal. After the service, people milled about outside in the sunshine, chatting and catching up on the week's news. Quinn lingered near the church steps, hoping for a chance to speak with Kate. She emerged eventually, surrounded by a small group of women who were all talking animatedly about something. Kate listened with a patient smile, but her eyes scanned the crowd until they found Quinn. She excused herself from the group and made her way over to him. In the daylight, without the black mourning clothes, she looked younger and softer. She wore a simple blue calico dress with tiny white flowers, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a neat bun that showed the graceful curve of her neck. "Mr. Ollander," she said warmly, "I am glad you came. Please call me Quinn, and I am glad I came too." "You have a remarkable voice, Miss Oliver." "Kate," she corrected with a smile. "If I am to call you Quinn, you must call me Kate." "Kate," he repeated, liking the way her name felt on his tongue. "Would you allow me to walk you home? Or are you spoken for already?" A shadow passed across Kate's face, so quick Quinn almost missed it. "I am not spoken for, but I live at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house and it is quite a walk. I would not want to impose." "It would be no imposition at all," Quinn assured her. "I would welcome the company if you will have it." Kate considered for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Let me just let Mrs. Henderson know." They set off down the main street of Chico, walking slowly in the warm sunshine. The town was busier on Sunday, with families out for afternoon strolls and children playing in the dusty streets. Quinn kept his hands clasped behind his back, very aware of Kate walking beside him, the rustle of her skirts and the faint scent of lavender that seemed to follow her. "Have you lived in Chico long?" Quinn asked. "About 3 years," Kate replied. "I came from Sacramento after my father passed away. There was nothing left for me there, and I had heard there was work in the valley. Mrs. Henderson took me in and got me a position at the general store." "And your mother?" "She died when I was born," Kate said quietly. "It was just my father and me for a long time. He was a clerk for a shipping company, but he took sick with pneumonia one winter and never recovered." Quinn heard the echo of loss in her voice, recognized it because it matched his own. "I am sorry. Losing a parent is hard." "Losing the only family you have is harder still." Kate glanced up at him, understanding clear in her green eyes. "You and Marcus were close." "He was everything to me," Quinn said, the words coming easier than he expected. "Our parents died when I was young. Marcus could have left me with relatives, gone off to make his own way, but he did not. He worked himself to the bone to keep us fed and clothed and together. Everything I know about being a man I learned from him. He would be proud of you, Kate said softly. I hope so. I aim to keep the ranch going, make something of it. That is what he would have wanted. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, turning off the main street onto a quieter residential road lined with modest houses and small gardens. Kate pointed out Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, a two-story structure with a wide front porch and cheerful yellow paint. This is me, she said, stopping at the front gate. Thank you for the walk, Quinn. Would you let me walk you home again? Quinn asked. Next Sunday, perhaps. Kate's smile was gentle and a little sad. I would like that. But Quinn, you should know that I am not looking for anything serious. I have my work and my singing, and that is enough for me. Quinn felt a flicker of disappointment but nodded. I understand. But I would still like to be your friend, if you will let me. I think I would like that too, Kate said, and the warmth in her voice made Quinn's heart lift. Over the following weeks, Quinn fell into a new routine. During the week, he worked the ranch, repairing fences and tending to the small herd of cattle Marcus had built up. It was hard, lonely work, and Quinn often found himself talking to his brother as if Marcus were still there, asking for advice on which pasture to use or how to handle a particularly stubborn cow. But Sundays became something Quinn looked forward to with an anticipation that surprised him. He would ride into town for church, sit in his usual back pew and listen to Kate sing, and then afterward, he would walk her back to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. Quinn learned that Kate loved to read, that she had taught herself to play the piano though she had no instrument of her own, and that she sometimes sang at weddings and other town events for a small fee. Kate, in turn, learned about Quinn's skill with horses, how he could gentle even the most wild-spirited Mustang with patience and a soft touch. She laughed when he told her about some of his adventures on cattle drives, the close calls with stampedes and river crossings, and she listened with quiet attention when he spoke about Marcus, never trying to rush his grief or tell him to move on. As September turned to October, Quinn found himself falling for Kate in a way that both thrilled and terrified him. He tried to respect her stated wish to keep things as friendship, but it grew harder with each passing Sunday. He loved the way she laughed, throwing her head back with genuine delight. He loved how she could talk to anyone, from the wealthiest rancher to the poorest prospector, and make them feel valued. He loved her voice, of course, but even more, he loved the woman behind that voice. One Sunday in late October, as they were walking back from church, Kate seemed quieter than usual. Quinn glanced at her several times, noting the furrow between her brows and the way she kept worrying at her lower lip with her teeth. Is something wrong? He finally asked. Kate sighed. I probably should not burden you with it. Kate, we are friends. You can tell me anything. She was quiet for a long moment, and then the words came out in a rush. The general store is closing. The owner is selling the building and moving back east to live with his daughter. I will be out of work by the end of the month. Quinn felt a jolt of alarm. What will you do? I am not sure, Kate admitted. Mrs. Henderson says I can stay at the boarding house and help her with the cleaning and cooking to pay for my room, but I need real work. There are not many opportunities for single women in Chico beyond teaching, and the school already has a teacher. Quinn's mind raced. Without thinking it through, he said, Come work at the ranch. Kate stopped walking and stared at him. What? Come work at the ranch, Quinn repeated, warming to the idea even as he spoke. I could use the help. Marcus always said a ranch runs better with more than one pair of hands. You could help with the house, maybe the chickens and the garden. I would pay you fair wages and provide room and board. Quinn, I could not possibly. Why not? Quinn challenged. "It is honest work and you need employment. I am offering it." Kate's cheeks had flushed pink. People would talk. A single woman living on a ranch with a single man. "So we make it proper," Quinn said. "Mrs. Henderson could act as chaperone. She could come stay at the ranch too. There is plenty of room, and I know she has been thinking about retiring from the boarding house business. Or if that does not suit, you could ride out each day from town." Kate shook her head slowly, but Quinn could see she was considering it. That would be a long ride twice a day. "Then Mrs. Henderson comes too." "Kate, I am not trying to compromise your reputation or push for something you are not ready for. I am just trying to help a friend who needs work, and I genuinely could use the assistance. Marcus ran that ranch with hired help before. There is nothing improper about it if we do it right." Kate studied his face for a long moment, and Quinn tried to keep his expression open and honest, though his heart was hammering in his chest. Finally, she said, "Let me talk to Mrs. Henderson. If she is willing to come along as chaperone, then perhaps we could try it for a trial period." Relief flooded through Quinn. That sounds fair. That evening, Kate spoke with Mrs. Henderson, who surprised them both by being immediately enthusiastic about the idea. The older woman had been running her boarding house for 15 years and was tired, she admitted. The thought of helping out on a ranch, with real cooking and cleaning to do but not the constant parade of guests and boarders, appealed to her greatly. Plus, she liked Quinn and thought he was a good, honest man, so it was settled. The first week of November, Kate and Mrs. Henderson moved out to the Ollander ranch, with their belongings packed into a wagon Quinn borrowed for the occasion. He had spent the previous week cleaning and preparing the house, which was larger than Kate had expected. There were 4 bedrooms upstairs, so Mrs. Henderson took one, Kate took another, and Quinn kept his own room, leaving one spare. Downstairs was a generous kitchen with a big iron stove, a sitting room with a stone fireplace, and a dining room with a sturdy oak table Marcus had built himself. Kate fell in love with the place immediately. It was nothing fancy, but it was solid and well made, and she could see the care that had gone into it. The first few days were spent settling in and establishing routines. Mrs. Henderson took over the cooking, which was a relief to Quinn, who had been surviving mostly on beans and whatever game he could shoot. Kate threw herself into organizing the household, cleaning and mending and making the place feel like a real home. She also took responsibility for the chickens and the small vegetable garden that had gone a bit wild without Marcus to tend it. Quinn showed her around the property, introduced her to the cattle, and the 2 horses he kept in the barn. Kate was nervous around the large animals at first, but Quinn was patient, showing her how to approach them calmly and confidently. "They can sense fear," he explained, guiding her hand to touch the velvet nose of his favorite mare, a dappled gray named Silver. "But if you are calm, they will be calm too." Kate stroked Silver's nose gently, marveling at the softness. "She is beautiful. She is smart too," Quinn said with obvious pride. "Best horse I have ever trained. She was wild when I got her, would not let anyone within 10 feet. But we came to an understanding, did we not, girl?" Silver whickered softly and nuzzled Quinn's shoulder, making Kate laugh. "I think she loves you." "The feeling is mutual," Quinn admitted. He looked at Kate, standing there in the dusty barn with hay in her hair and a smudge of dirt on her cheek, and he thought she had never looked more beautiful. He wanted to tell her that, wanted to pull her close and kiss her until they were both breathless, but he held himself back. He had promised her friendship, and he would honor that, no matter how difficult it became. As the weeks passed, they all settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mrs. Henderson was up first each morning, getting the stove going and starting breakfast. Kate would come down shortly after to help, and Quinn would come in from the barn where he had already been working for an hour, seeing to the animals. They ate together at the big kitchen table, talking about the day's plans and tasks, and then they would scatter to their various responsibilities. Quinn found himself inventing reasons to work near wherever Kate was. If she was hanging laundry, he suddenly needed to repair the fence nearby. If she was in the garden, he had to check on the irrigation ditches that ran along that side of the property. He tried not to be obvious about it, but Mrs. Henderson noticed and would sometimes catch his eye with a knowing smile that made his ears burn. Kate, for her part, seemed to bloom in the country air. The sadness Quinn had first seen in her eyes faded, replaced by a quiet contentment. She sang while she worked, filling the house and yard with music. Sometimes Quinn would stop whatever he was doing and just listen, that same feeling of peace washing over him that he had felt at Marcus's funeral. One afternoon in late November, Quinn came back to the house earlier than usual to find Kate in the sitting room, dusting the bookshelves. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, turning her hair to burnished copper. She was humming to herself, completely absorbed in her task. Quinn stood in the doorway watching her, and his heart clenched with longing so intense it almost hurt. He must have made some sound because Kate turned, startled, and then smiled when she saw him. "You are back early," she observed. "Finished mending the fence in the south pasture," Quinn said, stepping into the room. "Thought I would see if you needed any help with anything." Kate gestured at the bookshelves. "I was just going through Marcus's books. He had quite a collection. Have you read them all?" Quinn shook his head. "Marcus was the reader. He tried to get me interested, but I never had the patience for it." Kate pulled down a worn copy of a novel and ran her fingers over the cover. "Maybe I could read to you sometime if you would like. After supper, perhaps, while we are sitting by the fire." The thought of long winter evenings with Kate's voice reading stories to him sounded like heaven. "I would like that very much." They started that very night, after Mrs. Henderson had retired upstairs and the dishes were washed and put away. Kate settled into one of the chairs by the fire with a book while Quinn sat in the other chair and pretended to whittle a piece of wood. In truth, he barely paid attention to what his hands were doing. He was entirely focused on Kate, on the rise and fall of her voice as she brought the story to life, on the way the firelight played across her features. It became their nightly ritual. Sometimes Mrs. Henderson would join them, but often she would excuse herself early, leaving Quinn and Kate alone by the fire. They never did anything improper, never even sat particularly close together, but the intimacy of those evenings felt more profound than any physical touch. Quinn learned the cadence of Kate's reading voice, could predict when she would pause for dramatic effect or when a particular passage moved her. December brought the first real cold snap, and with it, preparations for Christmas. Mrs. Henderson threw herself into baking, filling the kitchen with the scents of gingerbread and apple pie. Kate made simple decorations from pine boughs and berries, draping them over the mantel and around the doorways. Quinn went out and cut a small tree, which they set up in the sitting room and decorated with strings of popcorn and dried orange slices. It was the first Christmas since Marcus died, and Quinn felt his brother's absence keenly. But having Kate and Mrs. Henderson there helped. On Christmas morning, they exchanged simple gifts. Quinn gave Mrs. Henderson a new shawl he had bought in town, and she gave him warm socks she had knitted herself. Kate had embroidered new dish towels for Mrs. Henderson, who declared them too pretty to use. When Kate handed Quinn his gift, her cheeks were pink. "It is not much," she said. Quinn unwrapped the brown paper carefully to find a leather bookmark she had tooled with an intricate design of horses running wild. "Kate, this is beautiful. When did you learn to do this? My father taught me when I was young, Kate said. I thought since we have been reading so much, you might like something to mark your place. Quinn ran his fingers over the leather, moved beyond words. I love it, thank you. Then he pulled out his gift for her, suddenly nervous. I hope this is all right. I know you did not have much opportunity to play, and I thought. Kate gasped when she saw the instrument case. Quinn, you did not. Open it, he urged. She lifted the lid with trembling hands to reveal a small, portable accordion. It was not new, but Quinn had taken it to be refurbished, and it gleamed with polish. I know it is not a piano, he said quickly. But the man at the music shop in town said it was a good instrument, and I thought you could play it here if you wanted. Kate looked up at him with tears in her eyes. I do not know what to say. This is too much. It is not too much, Quinn said firmly. Kate, you have brought so much to this house, to my life. Let me give you this. She set the accordion carefully aside and crossed to him, and before Quinn realized what she intended, she had risen on her toes and kissed his cheek. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Quinn stood frozen, his skin burning where her lips had touched. Kate stepped back, looking flustered, and Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat loudly from the kitchen doorway. Well now, the older woman said with forced cheer. Who is ready for Christmas breakfast? The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. Quinn caught Kate watching him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read, and when their hands accidentally touched while reaching for the same dish at dinner or passing each other in a doorway, there was a new awareness that made his breath catch. January came, bringing with it bitter cold and occasional snow. Quinn spent more time in the barn and the workshop, working on projects to pass the long winter hours. He was building new furniture for the house, a rocking chair and a small side table, and he would lose himself in the work, letting the rhythm of sawing and sanding quiet his mind. One evening, Kate came out to the workshop with a lantern and a steaming cup of coffee. Mrs. Henderson thought you might be getting cold out here, she said, holding out the cup. Quinn accepted it gratefully, wrapping his cold hands around the warm ceramic. That was thoughtful. Thank her for me. Kate wandered around the workshop, examining his tools and the half-finished furniture. You are very skilled at this. Did Marcus teach you? He taught me the basics, but I learned a lot of it myself. I like working with my hands, seeing something take shape from raw wood. Kate ran her fingers along the smooth arm of the rocking chair. It is beautiful. The woman who gets this will be very lucky. Quinn set down his coffee and crossed to stand beside her. Actually, I was making it for you. I thought you might like to have a chair to sit in while you read in the evenings. Kate's hand stilled on the wood. For me, for you, Quinn confirmed. He took a deep breath, knowing he was about to cross a line but unable to stop himself. Kate, I know you said you were not looking for anything serious, and I have tried to respect that. But I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond friendship. I am in love with you. I think I have been since the day I heard you sing at Marcus's funeral. Kate turned to face him, her eyes wide and shining in the lantern light. Quinn, you do not have to say anything right now, Quinn continued quickly. I am not asking you to make any promises or decisions. I just needed you to know the truth. If all you can offer me is friendship, I will take it and be grateful. But if there is any chance, any possibility that you might feel even a fraction of what I feel for you, then I am asking you to consider giving us a chance. Kate's hand came up to press against her chest as if her heart was beating too fast. I am afraid, she whispered. Quinn stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. Of what? Of loss. Of loving someone and having them taken away. My mother, my father, everyone I have ever loved has left me. I do not know if I can survive that kind of pain again. Oh, Kate, Quinn's voice was rough with emotion. I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to stay with you, to build a life with you. And whatever time we have, whether it is 5 years or 50, it will be worth it. You are worth it. A tear slipped down Kate's cheek, and then another. I am in love with you too, she said, her voice breaking. I have been fighting it for months because I was so scared. But Quinn, I am tired of being scared. I am tired of holding back from life because I am afraid of being hurt. Quinn reached up and gently wiped away her tears with his thumbs, cradling her face in his hands. Then stop fighting it. Let yourself love me. Let me love you. Kate made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was kissing him, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. Quinn pulled her close, kissing her back with all the pent-up longing of the past months. She tasted like peppermint tea and possibility, and Quinn felt like his heart might burst with joy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kate rested her forehead against Quinn's chest. Mrs. Henderson is going to say she knew it all along. Quinn laughed, the sound echoing off the workshop walls. She probably did. That woman does not miss much. They stood there holding each other in the lamplight, surrounded by sawdust and the smell of fresh-cut wood, and Quinn thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, he had been drowning in grief, certain he would never feel happy again. And now here he was, holding the woman he loved, with a future stretching before them bright with promise. They told Mrs. Henderson the next morning over breakfast. The older woman did indeed say she had known it all along, but she hugged them both and declared herself delighted. "So when is the wedding?" she asked bluntly. Quinn and Kate looked at each other, and Kate blushed. "We have not discussed that yet." "Well, do not wait too long, Mrs. Henderson advised. "Neither of you is getting any younger, and people will talk if you continue living under the same roof without being married." She was right, of course. Quinn proposed properly that evening, kneeling in front of Kate's chair by the fire with his mother's ring that Marcus had saved for him. Kate said yes through happy tears, and they set the date for early April, giving them time to make preparations but not waiting so long that it felt like forever. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. Kate wrote to a few distant cousins in Sacramento to invite them, though she was not certain they would make the journey. Quinn invited what friends he had in the area, mostly other ranchers and cowboys he had worked with over the years. Mrs. Henderson took charge of the menu and cake, declaring that she had been waiting for an occasion like this. The hardest part was deciding on the music. Kate wanted someone to sing at the ceremony, but she was not sure who. Most of the women in the church choir were not strong enough singers to handle a solo, and she did not want to sing at her own wedding. One evening in March, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Quinn suddenly said, "You could sing." Kate looked at him in confusion. "What, at the wedding? You could sing? Quinn, I am the bride. I cannot sing at my own wedding." "Why not?" Quinn asked. "Who says you cannot? Kate, your voice is one of the things I love most about you. When I think about our wedding day, I imagine hearing you sing. Not someone else but you." Kate shook her head. "That is not traditional." "When have either of us cared much about tradition?" Quinn countered. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "The day Marcus died was the worst day of my life. But then you sang, and for just a few minutes I felt like I could survive it. Your voice gave me hope when I had none. I want that same voice to be part of the happiest day of my life. Please, Kate, sing at our wedding." Kate squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I do not know if I can. What if I am too nervous? What if I cry?" "Then you cry," Quinn said simply. "It would not be the first time I have heard you sing with tears in your eyes." Kate was quiet for a long moment, and then she nodded slowly. "All right, If it means that much to you, I will try, but I might need someone to accompany me. Could we hire a pianist from town? Whatever you need, Quinn promised. As April approached, Kate found herself struggling with what song to sing. She wanted it to be perfect, something that captured everything she felt for Quinn. She practiced various hymns and traditional wedding songs, but none of them felt quite right. 2 weeks before the wedding, she was in the kitchen with Mrs. Henderson, kneading bread dough when the older woman said casually, "Have you thought about singing Amazing Grace?" Kate paused in her kneading. "For the wedding. You sang it at Marcus's funeral," Mrs. Henderson said. It was the second song after Abide With Me. I remember thinking that I had never heard it sung quite so beautifully. And is that not what love is? Amazing grace, being found when you were lost, being saved from whatever darkness you were in. Kate stared at the dough in her hands, Mrs. Henderson's words echoing in her mind. She thought about that hot August day when she had stood beside Marcus Ollander's grave, singing for a man she barely knew and a brother she had not yet met. She thought about how Quinn had looked, standing there with grief etched into every line of his face, and how something in her heart had recognized something in his. "Yes," Kate whispered. "That is exactly it." She sang Amazing Grace at their wedding on April 7th, 1883, in the same church where she had sung so many Sunday hymns. The small building was packed with well-wishers, more than Quinn or Kate had expected. Word of the cowboy and the singing bride had spread through the community, and people were curious and supportive in equal measure. Kate wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her alter from one that had belonged to her mother, saved all these years. She carried wildflowers that Quinn had picked that morning, and her hair was loose around her shoulders the way Quinn loved it. The ceremony itself was brief and traditional, but when it came time for the music, Kate handed her bouquet to Mrs. Henderson and stepped forward. The pianist they had hired, a kind middle-aged man named Mr. Daniels, began to play, and Kate opened her mouth and sang. Her voice was not quite steady at first, made shaky by emotion and the surreal quality of the moment. But as she sang the familiar words about being lost and being found, about grace and redemption, her voice grew stronger. She looked directly at Quinn as she sang, saw the tears streaming unabashedly down his face, and she felt her own eyes overflow. When she reached the verse about 10,000 years, Kate's voice broke completely. She stopped singing, certain she could not continue. But then Quinn stepped forward and took her hand, and together they finished the verse, their voices twining together imperfectly but beautifully. The congregation joined in for the final verse, and the small church rang with voices raised in celebration. Afterward, as they stood outside accepting congratulations, Quinn pulled Kate close and whispered in her ear, "That was perfect. You were perfect." Kate turned her face up to his, not caring that everyone could see. "Ask me to sing at all our important moments," she said. "Every anniversary, every celebration, ask me to fill our life with music." "I will," Quinn promised, "starting right now." And he kissed her there on the church steps while their friends and neighbors cheered. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard under the spring sunshine. Mrs. Henderson had outdone herself with food, and there was music and dancing and laughter. Kate danced with Quinn and with several of his cowboy friends, and Quinn danced with Mrs. Henderson and with some of the older ladies from church. As the sun began to set and people started to head home, Kate and Quinn stood together on the porch of what was now officially their home, watching the last golden light fade from the sky. Quinn wrapped his arms around Kate from behind, and she leaned back against his chest, feeling completely at peace. "This morning I was so nervous I thought I might be sick," Kate admitted. But now I cannot imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else." "Neither can I," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ollander." Kate turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw with her fingers. "Take me inside, husband." The first year of their marriage was not without its challenges. There were times when the ranch work seemed overwhelming, when money was tight, and the weather was uncooperative. There were adjustments to be made, learning to share space and life and decisions with another person. But through it all, Kate and Quinn held fast to each other and to the love that had grown between them. Mrs. Henderson stayed on at the ranch, a beloved part of their household. She doted on them both and made no secret of her hope for grandchildren, even though she was not technically related to either of them. Kate and Quinn would exchange amused glances over her head when she made pointed comments about the spare bedroom and how it would make a wonderful nursery. In late summer, almost exactly a year after they had met, Kate began to feel unwell in the mornings. She dismissed it at first as something she had eaten, but when it continued for 2 weeks, Mrs. Henderson took her aside with knowing eyes. "Child, when did you last have your monthly courses?" The older woman asked bluntly. Kate started to answer, then stopped as realization dawned. "I thought I was just irregular because of the change in routine and—" "You are with child," Mrs. Henderson said firmly but kindly. "I have seen enough women in the family way to recognize the signs." "Have you told Quinn?" Kate shook her head, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. "I did not know for certain until just now." "Well, go tell him," Mrs. Henderson urged. "That man will be over the moon." Kate found Quinn in the barn, brushing down silver after a long ride checking the fence lines. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him work, and her heart swelled with love and anticipation. "Quinn," he looked up with that smile that still made her knees weak. "Hey there, beautiful." "I did not hear you come in." Kate walked over to him, suddenly nervous now that the moment was here. "I have something to tell you, and I am not sure how you will take it." Quinn's face immediately creased with concern. He set down the brush and gave her his full attention. "What is it?" "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Kate assured him quickly. "Better than fine, actually. Quinn, I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Quinn just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a grin split his face, so wide and joyful that Kate started laughing. He whooped with delight and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she shrieked at him to put her down before he made her dizzy. "A baby," Quinn said, his voice filled with wonder. He set Kate carefully back on her feet and immediately dropped to his knees, pressing his ear against her stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your papa." Kate ran her fingers through Quinn's hair, her own eyes wet with happy tears. "We are going to be parents." "You are going to be an incredible mother," Quinn said, looking up at her. "Our child is so lucky." Their son was born the following spring on a rainy April morning, squalling his arrival to the world with impressive volume. They named him Marcus, after Quinn's brother. And from the moment Quinn first held him, Kate knew her husband had found a new purpose in life. Quinn was a devoted father, always willing to walk the floor with a crying baby or change a soiled diaper or just sit and stare at his son in wonder. Kate discovered that she loved being a mother, though it was harder and more exhausting than she had imagined. Mrs. Henderson was an invaluable help, stepping in to give Kate a break when she needed one, and sharing her years of wisdom about child rearing. When Marcus was 6 months old and sleeping through the night more often than not, Kate finally had the energy to start singing again. She would sing to Marcus as she rocked him, lullabies and hymns and sometimes just improvised melodies. Quinn would often stop whatever he was doing just to listen. that same look of peaceful contentment on his face that he had worn since the day they met. Life settled into a new rhythm, punctuated by the milestones of Marcus's growth. His first smile, his first tooth, his first steps, all celebrated with joy and wonder. The ranch prospered under Quinn's careful management, and they were able to hire some help, taking some of the pressure off Quinn's shoulders. When Marcus was 2, Kate discovered she was pregnant again. This time, a daughter arrived in late winter, a tiny thing with Kate's auburn hair and Quinn's blue eyes. They named her Ollander, after Kate's mother, and Marcus was initially suspicious of this new creature that took up so much of everyone's attention but eventually warmed to his role as big brother. The years rolled on, busy and full and happy. Quinn expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land when it became available. Kate sang at church and at weddings and other community events, her reputation as the best singer in the county firmly established. Mrs. Henderson grew older and slower, but she remained sharp as a tack and continued to rule the kitchen with benevolent authority. Marcus and Ollander grew like weeds, healthy and bright, and loved beyond measure. Marcus showed his father's quiet competence and way with animals, while Ollander had her mother's gift for music and her father's stubborn determination. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Kate back to the church where they had married. It was empty on that weekday afternoon, quiet and peaceful. They sat in the front pew holding hands, and Quinn said, "Sing for me." Kate smiled. "What do you want to hear?" "Amazing Grace," Quinn said. "The song that started everything." So Kate stood and walked to the front of the church, and she sang. Her voice was richer now, matured with age and experience. She sang about being lost and being found, about grace and mercy and love that endured. And when she finished, Quinn came to her and took her hands. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for singing at Marcus's funeral that day. Thank you for agreeing to sing at our wedding. Thank you for every song since then. You have filled my life with music, Kate." Kate cupped his face in her hands. "You saved me," she said. "That day at the funeral, I was so lost. I had nothing and no one and no hope for the future. But then you looked at me like I was something precious, and you gave me a reason to believe that life could be beautiful again. You asked me to sing at our wedding, but really, you asked me to choose joy. And I have chosen it every day since with you." They kissed there in the empty church, a promise renewed and a love reaffirmed. Outside, the spring sunshine was warm on the California hills, and birds sang in the oak trees. Inside, 2 people who had found each other in grief and built a life in joy stood together, grateful for every moment. As the years continued to pass, Kate and Quinn's love only deepened. They faced the challenges that came with any long marriage, the disagreements and difficult times, but they always came back to each other. They had learned early that life was too short and too precious to waste on holding grudges or nursing hurts. When Marcus was 16, he fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a spirited girl named Sarah with a laugh that could be heard across the valley. Quinn gave his blessing, seeing in his son the same kind of deep, true love he had found with Kate. The young couple married the following year, and Kate sang at their wedding, just as Quinn had known she would. Ollander proved more difficult to settle. She had ambitions beyond Chico, dreams of singing in San Francisco or even further afield. Kate understood that restlessness, remembered her own younger days when she had felt trapped by circumstance. But it still hurt when Ollander announced at 20 that she was moving to the city to pursue a career as a professional singer. Quinn held Kate while she cried the night before Ollander left. "She has to follow her own path," he said gently. "Just like we did." "I know," Kate whispered. "I just wish her path led closer to home. But Alina returned often, and she never failed to tell her parents how much she loved them and how grateful she was for their support. She built a successful career, singing in theaters and concert halls, and she always credited her mother as her first and most important teacher. Mrs. Henderson passed away peacefully in her sleep one summer night when she was 78 years old. They buried her in the Chico cemetery, not far from where Marcus Ollander was laid to rest. Kate sang at the funeral, her voice wavering with genuine grief for the woman who had been like a mother to her. But she made it through all 4 verses of Mrs. Henderson's favorite hymn, and Quinn stood beside her with his hand on her back, supporting her. Marcus and Sarah took over more of the ranch operations as Quinn grew older, but Quinn never fully retired. He still liked to go out and check the fences, still spent hours in his workshop building furniture. Kate's hair turned silver, and her face gained lines earned through years of laughter and tears. But her voice remained strong and true, and she still sang every Sunday at church. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a party at the ranch. Marcus and Sarah were there with their 4 children, and Alina came home from San Francisco with the young man she had been courting, a violinist named James who looked at her the way Quinn had always looked at Kate. As the party wound down and the younger grandchildren were put to bed, Kate stood up and announced that she wanted to sing. The family gathered around as Quinn sat in the rocking chair he had built for Kate 42 years earlier, and Kate stood before them with her hands folded. She sang Amazing Grace again, her voice filling the house the same way it had filled the church on their wedding day. But this time, when she reached the 2nd verse, Marcus joined in with his deep bass. Then Sarah added her alto, and Alina her pure soprano, and finally James pulled out his violin and began to play. Even the older grandchildren joined in, their young voices adding to the harmony. Quinn sat listening with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. This was his family, built on a foundation of love that had started with grief and grown into something more magnificent than he had ever imagined possible. After the song ended and people started to disperse, Kate came to sit on the arm of Quinn's chair. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Quinn looked around the room at their children and grandchildren, at the house he had built with his brother and made into a home with his wife. "I am thinking about the day Marcus died," he said. "I thought my life was over. I thought I would never be happy again. And then I heard you sing." Kate took his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "And you asked me to sing at our wedding, the grieving cowboy who heard something in my voice that gave him hope." "It was not just your voice," Quinn said. "It was you, all of you. The woman who was brave enough to love again, even though she was terrified of losing. The woman who chose to build a life with me in this dusty corner of California. Kate, you have made every day an adventure. Every morning I wake up grateful that you said yes." "I am the grateful one," Kate insisted. "You saw me, Quinn. When I was invisible to everyone else, just the girl who sang at funerals and worked at the general store, you saw me. You valued me. You loved me when I did not know how to love myself." They kissed, and someone in the background made a joking comment about old people romance, but neither Kate nor Quinn cared. They had earned this love, fought for it and nurtured it, and protected it through 3 decades of marriage. Alina announced her engagement to James that night, and of course, she asked her mother to sing at the wedding. Kate agreed immediately, though she was 75 years old now, and sometimes her voice was not as strong as it once was. But when the wedding day came, and Kate stood before another congregation to sing Amazing Grace, her voice rang out clear and powerful, fueled by love for her daughter and joy for the life Alina was beginning. Quinn sat in the front row with tears in his eyes, just as he had at their own wedding so many years before. His hair was white now, and his hands were gnarled with arthritis, but his love for Kate burned as bright as ever. As the years advanced further, Quinn and Kate spent more time simply being together. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the ranch, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes Kate would sing softly old songs they both loved, and Quinn would close his eyes and let the music wash over him. When Quinn was 78, he had a bad fall from a horse and broke his hip. The recovery was long and difficult, and for the first time, he looked truly old. Kate nursed him through it with fierce determination, refusing to let him give up when the pain made him want to. She sang to him during the worst of it, the same songs she had sung to their children when they were sick or scared. "You sang to me the day we met," Quinn said one night as Kate helped him back to bed after his exercises, "and you have been singing to me ever since. Kate, if I die tomorrow, I will die a happy man because of you." "You are not dying tomorrow or any time soon," Kate said firmly. "We have more years together, Quinn Ollander. I am not done with you yet." Quinn laughed and pulled her down for a kiss. "Yes, madam." He recovered, though he never regained his full strength, but he could still walk and ride and work in his workshop, and that was enough. Marcus ran the ranch now, with his own sons helping, but Quinn liked to go out and offer advice whether it was wanted or not. It made him feel useful, kept him connected to the land he loved. On a warm summer day when Quinn was 82 and Kate was 79, they were sitting on the porch together when Alina arrived unexpectedly with her family. Behind them was a wagon loaded with a large, mysterious shape covered by a tarp. "What is all this?" Kate asked as Alina and James helped their children climb down from the wagon. "It is a gift," Alina said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "For both of you, but especially for Mama. James, help me uncover it." They pulled away the tarp to reveal a beautiful upright piano, the wood polished to a high shine. Kate gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. "Alina, we cannot accept this. It is too much." "It absolutely is not too much," Alina said firmly. "Mama, you taught me everything I know about music. You made me the singer I am today. You have sung at every important moment of my life and the lives of everyone in this family. You sang at funerals and weddings and christenings, and you never asked for anything in return except the joy of making music. So please, let us give you this. Let yourself have the piano you have always wanted." Kate was crying now, and Quinn wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "It is a wonderful gift," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." They moved the piano into the sitting room, and Marcus and his sons helped position it near the window where the light was good. Kate sat down at the bench with trembling hands and placed her fingers on the keys. She played a simple scale, marveling at the sound, and then began to play and sing Amazing Grace. The whole family joined in, 3 generations of voices raised together, and Quinn thought his heart might burst with the fullness of it. This was what he and Kate had built, not just a ranch or a house, but a family rooted in love and faith and the power of music to heal and unite. As Kate played, Quinn caught her eye and mouthed, "I love you." She smiled at him through her tears and mouthed it back, never missing a note. The years that followed were slower and quieter but no less precious. Kate played the piano every day, sometimes for hours, relearning old songs and discovering new ones. Quinn would sit in his chair and listen, perfectly content. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with another big party, and this time there were great-grandchildren running around, adding to the joyful chaos. Kate sang at the anniversary party, of course. Her voice was not what it once was, wavering and thin in places, but the emotion behind it was as powerful as ever. She sang Amazing Grace one more time, and when she finished, there was not a dry eye in the house. Quinn stood and took her hand, pulling her close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything. For every song, every day, every moment. You are my amazing grace, Kate. You saved me." "We saved each other," Kate corrected, reaching up to touch his weathered cheek. "And we built something beautiful together." They danced, swaying slowly to music only they could hear, while their family watched with love and affection. This was the legacy they would leave behind, not just land or property, but the example of a love that had endured through half a century, through joy and sorrow, triumph and loss, and had only grown stronger with time. Quinn passed away peacefully at the age of 85, surrounded by his family. Kate held his hand as he took his last breath, singing softly the same song she had sung at his brother's funeral so many years before. It seemed fitting somehow, bringing their story full circle. The funeral was held at the church where they had married, and Kate insisted on singing even though everyone told her she did not have to. She stood before the congregation in her black dress, her silver hair pinned back, and she opened her mouth to sing Amazing Grace. Her voice cracked and wavered, and twice she had to stop and compose herself. But Ollander stood and joined her mother, her strong voice supporting Kate's failing one. Then Marcus added his voice, and Sarah and all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, until the entire church was singing together. Kate made it through all the verses, and when she finished, she looked down at Quinn's coffin and whispered, "Until we meet again, my love. Thank you for asking me to sing." She lived another 3 years, spending her days playing the piano and singing for her ever-growing family. She taught her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to sing, passing on not just the technical skills but the understanding of music as something sacred and powerful, capable of healing wounds and celebrating joy. On a spring afternoon much like the one when she had married Quinn, Kate sat down at her piano and played through Amazing Grace one final time. When she finished, she folded her hands in her lap and closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her face. That was how Ollander found her an hour later, gone to join the man she had loved for more than 50 years. They buried Kate beside Quinn in the Chico cemetery, under the oak trees where the wildflowers grew. Ollander sang at the funeral, her voice carrying across the assembled mourners just as her mother's had done so many times before. She sang Amazing Grace, and her children joined her, and her nieces and nephews, and the tradition continued. In the years that followed, the ranch remained in the Ollander family, passed down through Marcus and his children. The house stood strong, filled with new generations of love and laughter and music. The rocking chair Quinn had built for Kate was preserved and treasured, a tangible reminder of his love for her. And on special occasions, when the whole family gathered together, someone would sit down at Kate's piano and play, and they would all sing Amazing Grace. They sang for Quinn and Kate, for Marcus and Mrs. Henderson, for all the people who had gone before. They sang in remembrance and in celebration, in sorrow and in joy. They sang because that was what Kate had taught them, that music had the power to connect the past with the present, to honor what was lost while embracing what remained. The story of Kate and Quinn became part of family lore, told and retold to each new generation. The tale of how a grieving cowboy heard a woman singing at his brother's funeral and fell in love with her voice, how he asked her to sing at their wedding, and she said yes. How they built a life together in the dusty California valley, raised children and grandchildren, weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, and loved each other faithfully for more than 50 years. It was a story about grief transformed into joy, about second chances and the courage to love again. It was about the power of music to heal and unite, about the importance of family and faith, and holding fast to the people you love. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple, about two people who found each other at the darkest moment of their lives and chose to walk into the light together. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Quinn and Kate were together still, his hand in hers, her voice raised in song, the love between them eternal and unbreakable. They had made their vows before God and community, promising to love each other until death parted them. But death had been merely a pause, not an ending, because true love never dies. It lives on in the hearts of those left behind, in the stories told and retold, in the music that echoes down through the generations. The ranch still stands today, though the original house has been expanded and updated over the years. But Kate's piano remains in the sitting room, still played regularly by her descendants. And in the cemetery under the oak trees, two headstones sit side by side, weathered by time but still legible. On one is carved simply, Quinn Ollander, beloved husband, father, grandfather. And on the other, Katherine Oliver, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. Her voice was a gift from God. Between the two stones, someone had planted wildflowers, the same kind Kate had carried at her wedding. They bloom every spring without fail, bright and beautiful, a living reminder of the love that had brought two lonely people together and created something that would endure long after they were gone. Visitors to the cemetery sometimes report hearing singing carried on the wind, a woman's voice pure and sweet, singing Amazing Grace. The rational-minded dismiss it as imagination or the wind in the trees, but the Ollander family knows better. It is Kate, still singing, still bringing comfort and beauty to the world just as she did in life. And so the story ends where it began, with a song at a funeral. But between that first meeting and the final goodbye, Kate and Quinn lived a full and beautiful life, one marked by love and music and the courage to choose hope over fear. They proved that the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, that loss can transform into gain, and that sometimes, when you are at your lowest, grace arrives in the most unexpected forms. For Quinn, grace came in the form of a woman singing at his brother's funeral. For Kate, it came in the form of a grieving cowboy who saw her as more than just a voice. Together, they found what everyone hopes to find, a love that endures, a partnership that strengthens, and a life that matters. They left behind not just descendants and property, but a legacy of love that continues to inspire everyone who hears their story. The sun sets now over the California Valley, just as it did when Quinn and Kate walked together in the evenings. The land endures, the seasons turn, and life goes on. But the memory of their love remains, as constant and true as the North Star, guiding their family forward through whatever challenges come. And on quiet evenings, when the wind is just right, you can still hear it if you listen carefully enough, the echo of a woman's voice singing, bringing comfort to the grieving and joy to the celebrating, just as it always has and always will. Their story is complete now, every thread tied off, every question answered. Quinn asked Kate to sing at their wedding, and she did, and in doing so, she sang herself into a life beyond her wildest dreams. They proved that love can bloom even in the midst of grief, that two broken people can come together and make each other whole, and that sometimes the most beautiful songs are the ones born from sorrow and transformed by hope. This is their legacy, passed down through generations. Choose love, choose hope, choose to sing even when your heart is breaking, because you never know who might be listening and how your song might change their life forever.